On the night of September 2nd, 2015, in a luxury apartment complex in Dallas, a single gunshot shattered the quiet parking garage. Just seconds later, a young woman collapsed beside her car. Blood spread across the concrete, and a life that had just begun to touch happiness was gone forever. Her name was Kendra Hatcher, a gentle woman devoted to her community who had just found love after years of focusing on her career. But what Kendra never knew was that from the very moment her heart began to open, another woman had already started planning her death. The person behind it all was Brenda Delgado, the ex-girlfriend of the man Kendra loved. When she received an email announcing that she had been replaced, Brenda did not choose to let go. She chose revenge. What began as smoldering jealousy quickly turned into an organized murder plot. Accomplices were recruited. The plan was carefully arranged, and Kendra became the target. This was not just a murder. This was a story of twisted love, dangerous obsession, and a horrifying price of human selfishness. And it all began with a single email. On a warm summer day, Brenda Delgado received a message from her ex-boyfriend, Ricky Paniagua. They had once been together for many years, happy, and Ricky had even given Brenda a promise ring. But in February of that same year, Ricky ended the relationship because he was no longer happy. They stayed in touch as friends until June, when Brenda received a cold, crushing email. Ricky was dating someone new, a young, beautiful woman named Kendra Hatcher. What made it even more terrifying was that Brenda had not moved on with her life the way Ricky had. According to investigators, the moment she received that message, Brenda swore she would do anything to win Ricky back, and anyone who stood in her way, whether person or fate, could become a target. Meanwhile, Kendra Hatcher was living in a world of her own. From September 2014 to September 2015, her life seemed nearly perfect. Originally from Pleasant Plains, Illinois, Kendra earned her dental degree and moved to Dallas, Texas to begin a new chapter. Instead of opening her own private practice, she joined Smile Zone, a clinic providing dental care for underprivileged children. She truly believed she could change lives in her community. Outside of work, Kendra spent much of her time sharing the Bible and participating in church-building missions. She even provided free dental care for children in Ecuador. Her compassion seemed almost limitless. Then in May, something unexpected happened. Kendra met Ricky on Tinder. Just a few months later, by September, they were deeply in love. Kendra was living in one of Dallas's upscale neighborhoods at Gables Park 17, near the intersection of Cedar Springs and Arcade, a place where she believed her new life would finally be complete. But fate never allows everything to remain peaceful. Kendra Hatcher believed she was safe. Gables Park 17, the place she called home, was heavily secured with surveillance cameras, a 24-hour front desk, and tightly controlled parking access. Everything about it projected a sense of security. Her boyfriend, Ricky Paniagua, was also on the rise. He had just completed his dermatology residency at the University of Texas, and after only 4 months of dating, the two were already talking about marriage. To them, love had arrived at exactly the right time. They believed they were nearly the perfect couple, bound together by shared values and principles. Friends described Kendra as beautiful, kind-hearted, and always willing to help others. She poured her entire heart into both her career and her relationship with Ricky, carefully building the life she had always dreamed of. But as so often happens in tragic stories, one person's happiness ignites another's envy. And that envy would soon transform into a horrifying crime, one that would permanently change Ricky's life and take Kendra's. On September 2nd, after finishing her shift at Smile Zone, Kendra returned to her apartment at Gables Park 17. It was a Friday, the weekend ahead, and she was excitedly preparing for a Labor Day trip to Mexico with Ricky. Her mind was also filled with plans to move to San Francisco, dreaming of a brand new future. But Kendra had no idea that tragedy was already waiting inside the very building she believed was safe. At exactly 7:42 p.m., Kendra Hatcher drove into the secured parking garage of Gables Park 17 and parked in her usual spot. Just minutes later, 2 residents inside the building heard a woman's terrified scream, immediately followed by the cold echo of gunshots cutting through the quiet space. Another resident heard the horrifying sounds and instantly sensed that something was terribly wrong, even without knowing who had fired the shots. He quickly called 911. Before police arrived, several witnesses reported seeing a Jeep Cherokee speeding out of the garage, but no one knew whether it was connected to the gunfire or just another vehicle rushing away into the night. Police arrived at the scene within minutes, but nothing could change what had already happened. When they reached Kendra, she was motionless, gone forever. No one had ever imagined she could become a target. Kendra was the kind of person everyone hoped to meet, kind, gentle, and loved. During the crime scene examination, officers noticed something unsettling. Her purse was missing. It wasn't in her car. It wasn't anywhere in the garage. At first, investigators suspected a botched robbery that had escalated into murder. A magazine and spent shell casings were found scattered near her body, reinforcing that initial theory. But a closer inspection revealed terrifying details. The gunshot wound to Kendra's arm suggested she had been forced to place her hands behind her head when the shot was fired. The bullet trajectory indicated the shooter was positioned behind her as she knelt, a chilling sign that the scene had been staged to look like a robbery. This was no ordinary crime of opportunity. Once the scene was cleared, officers had to deliver the devastating news to Ricky, Kendra's boyfriend. His grief erupted instantly, a shock no one could ever prepare for. That same night after Kendra was murdered, Ricky Paniagua texted Brenda Delgado, his ex-girlfriend and longtime friend. Brenda pretended to be stunned by the news of Kendra's death and emphasized that she was willing to be there for Ricky at any time, day or night. Police immediately launched a deeper investigation. They reviewed security footage from Kendra's apartment building, searching for clues about the Jeep Cherokee seen fleeing the garage immediately after the gunshots. The video revealed that the Jeep had arrived at 7:15 p.m., 28 minutes, before Kendra pulled into the garage. A man was seen exiting the vehicle and walking directly to the exact spot where Kendra would later park. Moments later, he returned to the Jeep. This man was clearly connected to the crime, but neither he nor the vehicle was immediately recognizable. Soon after, investigators discovered that he hadn't acted alone. A woman was captured on camera driving the Jeep just seconds after the man got back inside. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This was a coordinated attack, carefully planned, not random. Unfortunately, the footage wasn't clear enough to identify the suspects or the license plate. With no other choice, detectives released still images to the public, hoping someone would recognize the vehicle. Then something unexpected happened. A man named José Luis Ortiz came forward claiming that the Jeep in the video belonged to him. He insisted that he had not been at the scene and had no idea his vehicle would become the centerpiece of a murder investigation. Normally, such a claim would raise serious suspicion, but Ortiz provided additional information, and suddenly, the case took a completely different turn. What Ortiz revealed left investigators both confused and outraged. The first person he named was Brenda Delgado, Ricky's ex-girlfriend. Brenda's family had always described her as gentle, thoughtful, deeply rooted in Christian values, and surrounded by a loving family. But Ortiz disclosed that on the morning of September 2nd, Brenda and her 26-year-old friend Crystal Cortez asked him to fix Crystal's broken car and to borrow his Jeep for the day. Ortiz agreed, believing he was simply helping two women with an everyday problem. According to the plan, they were supposed to meet Ortiz later at his home. But suddenly, everything changed. Brenda called and asked to meet instead at a nearby Chili's restaurant. And from that moment on, the murder plan was silently set into motion. Ortiz agreed to lend out the Jeep, still believing it was a harmless request. But when he arrived, the vehicle was gone, and so was Crystal. The two women eventually returned the Jeep later that night. By then, Ortiz already knew that Kendra had been murdered and that his Jeep had become part of the crime. Before contacting police, Ortiz confronted Brenda about the images released to the public. Brenda tried to calm him down, insisting that the Jeep in the footage was not his, it merely looked similar. Later, she changed her story, claiming that Crystal had driven the Jeep to Kendra's building to illegally retrieve items for a friend. That explanation sent chills through Ortiz. He began to fear that Kendra may have been caught in the middle or killed as a witness. Once police traced the Jeep back to Ortiz, he knew he had to come forward to avoid becoming a suspect. Ortiz also revealed that Brenda pressured him to stay silent, warning that if he were implicated, he could lose his US citizenship. She even offered to have the Jeep repainted to erase any evidence and promised to cover the costs. That attempt at deception only intensified Ortiz's suspicions. Determined to protect himself, he told police everything. Police immediately turned their attention to Brenda. During questioning, she claimed she didn't know who Kendra was and had nothing to do with the murder. Brenda produced a receipt from Chili's saying Ortiz could confirm they were eating together at the time Kendra was killed. She admitted she had been with Crystal when they borrowed the Jeep, but said she allowed Crystal to use it for the rest of the day, suggesting that this would point to the real killer. Next, detectives interviewed Crystal Cortez. At first, she delivered a complicated story. Crystal admitted that she was the one driving the Jeep in the surveillance video, but insisted she had been forced at gunpoint with her young son in the vehicle by an armed robber who made her drive to Kendra's building. Investigators quickly realized this story was a lie because the video showed no child inside the Jeep. When confronted, Crystal changed her story once again, a weak tactic against seasoned detectives. In the end, she admitted that she had agreed to drive a man to the garage to commit a robbery at Brenda's request, but she still insisted that she never knew a murder would take place. Backed into a corner, Crystal Cortez finally confessed her involvement, but she refused to take the fall alone. She stated clearly that Brenda was the true mastermind, driven by rage after learning that Ricky had moved on. At that moment, the puzzle pieces began to lock into place. Brenda could not accept being replaced, but instead of clinging in desperation, she chose to watch, control, and obsess. Because they had remained in contact, Ricky believed it was the honest thing to do to tell Brenda by email when his relationship with Kendra became serious. Brenda responded calmly, even supportively, and offered to remain friends. Ricky saw it as maturity, but he had no idea that that single message shattered Brenda's entire world. Just 2 weeks after learning that Kendra even existed, Brenda told Crystal outright that she wanted Kendra gone from Ricky's life, even if it meant death. For most people, that would have been the end of the friendship. But horrifyingly, Crystal agreed. Brenda's obsession only intensified. She skipped work just to follow Ricky. She broke into his email and discovered his plans to travel and to move away with Kendra to start a new life. In Brenda's mind, Kendra had become the replacement. The line between thought and action vanished. Brenda began searching for someone else to do the killing for her. First, she approached her cousin Moses Martinez, asking him to attack Kendra with a baseball bat. He refused. She then turned to Jennifer Escobar, making the same request convincing herself that knocking Kendra unconscious would give her time to win Ricky back. Jennifer also refused. By this point, Brenda had already buried herself deep inside Ricky's life. She had a key to his home and access to his bank account without his knowledge. When Jennifer continued to resist, Brenda escalated again. She offered drugs and $2,000 to kill Kendra. Once more she was rejected. Meanwhile, Brenda's bond with Crystal grew tighter. Crystal, a struggling single mother, admired Brenda's stable job, financial comfort, and independence. Later, evidence would reveal that Brenda had given Crystal $500, confirmed by an ATM receipt discovered after the murder. From that point on, Brenda and Crystal began roaming through the crime-ridden neighborhood where Crystal lived, searching for someone reckless enough to kill for money. Unbelievably, the two women approached multiple people bluntly, asking if they were willing to murder a young woman for cash. Every single one of them refused. Until they met Kristopher Love, 31 years old, the only person who did not turn his back on that cold-blooded offer. The three openly discussed how Kendra would be killed. In the end, they chose a gun, fast, clean, and fatal. Kristopher would be paid in cash, drugs, and promises of protection and connections in the criminal world. He agreed. Meanwhile, Brenda continued secretly monitoring Ricky's email. When she discovered that Ricky and Kendra were planning a trip to Mexico that very weekend, followed by a move to start a new life together, Brenda nearly lost control. She gave the order it had to happen immediately. From that moment on, Kendra became prey. Brenda and Crystal followed her every movement, memorizing her daily routines. Kristopher was positioned across from Smile Zone, sitting inside a Salvation Army store, even using binoculars to watch Kendra while she worked. That afternoon, they followed Kendra all the way home, and they discovered one crucial detail. By tailing closely behind another vehicle, it was possible to slip into the secured parking garage. With the route now mapped out, they became convinced the plan would succeed. After days of surveillance, the trio rehearsed the entire operation on September 1st. The next morning, after Ortiz dropped Brenda off at the Carrollton Library, he allowed Crystal to borrow the Jeep, the same vehicle that would soon become the murder car. They picked up Kristopher. Then they headed towards Smile Zone. At one point, Crystal even left briefly to pick up her child and niece, dropping them off with their grandmother, then returned to resume the murder plot as if nothing had happened. They followed Kendra as she left work. Heavy traffic delayed them by a few minutes, and that delay is what caused them to encounter her inside the garage itself. They slipped in behind another vehicle. When Kendra parked, Kristopher stepped out of the Jeep and opened fire. Crystal stayed behind the wheel waiting. After the killing, they drove straight to Kristopher's house, dropped him off, and then Crystal returned the Jeep to Ortiz, acting as though nothing had ever happened. Everything that followed, Crystal later confessed to police in exchange for a plea deal. She received 35 years in prison instead of life, and in reality, she even holds the possibility of early parole. However, Kristopher had no way out. The murder weapon was found in his vehicle. He confessed to everything and pointed directly at Brenda as the mastermind. As the man who pulled the trigger, Kristopher was sentenced to death. Only one piece remained: Brenda Delgado. She continued to deny responsibility, insisting she simply couldn't accept Ricky being happy with someone else. But when she realized the walls were closing in, Brenda fled. For 7 months, she lived like an international fugitive, eventually landing on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. A $100,000 reward was offered for any information leading to her capture, and then she was found hiding in Mexico. The following April, Brenda was arrested and extradited back to the United States under the condition that she would not face the death penalty. In court, Brenda pleaded not guilty and presented her own version of events, but the jury didn't believe her. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, pointed to one undeniable truth. Brenda orchestrated the murder of Kendra Hatcher. The verdict: life in prison without parole. A life locked behind bars. But even that sentence could never balance the loss carried by Kendra's family. One moment of jealousy destroyed an entire world. The pain didn't end with her loved ones. Colleagues, friends, and even the young patients Kendra once cared for were deeply shaken. Tammy Patino, Kendra's closest friend since their school days, said she no longer felt carefree or light-hearted. The loss left behind fear, emptiness, and a lingering sense of dread, not just for her, but for her husband and so many others. Kendra's patients still struggled to understand how three strangers, people who had never even spoken to her, could steal the life of someone so kind, bright, and generous. No one can predict what happens when obsession and jealousy overpower reason. Most people eventually let go and move on. But Brenda didn't, and she will spend the rest of her life in prison because of that choice. Yet no sentence, no punishment, can bring Kendra Hatcher back. A young woman, compassionate and devoted to her community, lost her life long before she had the chance to live out her dreams. If this case unsettles you, make sure to follow the channel. There are more true crime files ahead. For now, stay aware, stay cautious, and never underestimate the danger of human obsession.